The revenue drops on a Monday. By Wednesday, a key person walks out the door for good, and by Friday, a problem you were certain you'd handled comes back louder than before, all inside the same 7 days. Watch what happens to a capable person in that moment. They don't rise. They tighten. The thinking gets narrow, the breathing gets shallow, and every decision starts to feel like a threat instead of a choice. We tend to explain this away afterward. We say the person cracked under pressure as if pressure were a weight that simply crushes whoever is standing under it. But that's not what's actually happening. Pressure doesn't break people. Pressure reveals whether they built anything underneath the surface before the weight arrived. That's the real question this video is about. Not how to feel calm. Feelings come and go. But how to keep functioning, deciding, and leading when the ground itself is moving. Almost 2,000 years ago, a man held the most powerful position in the known world and watched it come apart in his hands. A plague killing millions, a war on the border, a betrayal from someone he trusted completely. What he did across those years is not a philosophy lesson. It's a blueprint for composure, a repeatable way to stay effective when everything you rely on stops being reliable. Let's take it apart piece by piece. Start with the situation itself, because the scale of it matters. Marcus Aurelius did not inherit a peaceful empire. During his reign, a disease we now call the Antonine Plague swept through the Roman world. Estimates suggest it killed somewhere between 5 and 10% of the entire population. Whole legions were hollowed out. The treasury was draining. Germanic tribes were pressing on the northern frontier at the same time. This was not one crisis. It was a stack of them, arriving without waiting their turn. Now here is the part people miss. Marcus did not become composed because the crisis demanded it. He was composed because of what he had done in the years no one was watching. Long before the plague, he kept a private notebook. Not for publication, not for an audience, just for himself. In it, he rehearsed again and again a single distinction. What is in my control and what is not. He wrote it so many times that by the time the real test came, it wasn't a nice idea. It was a reflex. That's the first piece of the blueprint, and it's the one most people skip. You cannot manufacture composure in the middle of the storm. The storm is too loud. Whatever mental habits you have built beforehand, those are the only tools you'll actually have access to when your heart rate spikes and the stakes go vertical. The entrepreneur who stays clear during a cash crisis isn't improvising calm. They practiced a way of thinking on small problems, so it was available for the large one. Epictetus, the former slave whose teaching shaped Marcus, put it plainly. We should discipline ourselves in small things and then extend that discipline outward to greater ones. The gym for composure is ordinary life, the minor delay, the unfair email, the plan that slips. Every one of those is a repetition. Handle those with deliberate steadiness, and you are quietly loading the reflex you'll need on the day the real weight lands. When pressure hits, the mind does something almost automatic. It expands the problem. It reaches out and tries to grab everything at once. The outcome, other people's reactions, the worst-case future, the version of you that already failed. That expansion feels like taking responsibility. It's actually the opposite. It's how you become useless. Because most of what your mind grabs in a crisis is not yours to move. You cannot control whether the market recovers this quarter. You cannot control whether a competitor makes a smart move. You cannot control how someone chooses to feel about a hard decision. And every second of attention you spend on those things is a second stolen from the small set of things you can actually change. Marcus faced this directly. He could not stop the plague. He could not command the disease to leave his soldiers. What he could control was his own conduct, his decisions, his standards, the example he set. So he ruthlessly cut the problem down to that. This is the discipline of the narrowed frame, and it is the single most practical move in the entire blueprint. When everything falls apart, do not ask what's going to happen. That question has no useful answer, and it feeds the panic. Ask instead, what is the next correct action that is fully within my power? Then do that one thing. Then ask again. A surgeon in a failing operation does not think about the lawsuit or the family in the waiting room. They think about the next suture. A trader watching the screen bleed does not fight the market's mood. They execute the one rule they set beforehand. This is not detachment. It's precision under load. Marcus wrote that you have power over your mind, not over outside events, and that realizing this is where strength is found. Read that not as comfort, but as instruction. The strength isn't in feeling fine. It's in refusing to spend yourself on what won't move, so you have everything left for what will. Now the story turns, and it turns on a specific act. As the plague drained the treasury and the war on the frontier demanded money Rome did not have, Marcus faced the pressure every leader dreads. The moment when you have to ask people to give up something during the worst of times. He could have taxed them harder. Emperors did. Instead, he made a decision that says almost everything about how composure works in leadership. He brought the imperial treasures, the palace's gold, the silk, the fine furniture, his wife's jewels, works of art, out onto the forum, and he sold them publicly. He auctioned off the wealth of the throne to fund the recovery. The message was unmistakable. Before I ask you to sacrifice, watch me sacrifice first. Here's why this matters for anyone who leads under pressure in any century. When things fall apart, people don't primarily follow your words. They read your behavior for information about how bad it really is and whether you can be trusted with the response. If you're protecting your own comfort while asking for theirs, they know. The composure drains out of the room, because composure in a group is contagious, and so is panic, and both start at the top. Marcus understood that leadership under pressure is not about projecting confidence you don't feel. It's about ordering your sacrifices correctly. Yours first. This is the part that ambitious people resist because it costs something real and immediate. But it is the only version of leadership that holds when the situation is genuinely dire. The founder who takes the pay cut before the layoffs, the manager who stays late through the crunch they're asking their team to endure. The composure isn't in the speech. It's in the sequence. Who gives up what, and in what order? Marcus reminded himself that what does not benefit the hive does not benefit the bee. In a crisis, your people are watching to find out whether you actually believe that. Your behavior answers before your mouth opens. There's a quieter kind of pressure that arrives after the loud kind, and it destroys more careers than the crisis itself. It's the story. In the year 175, one of Marcus's most trusted generals, Avidius Cassius, declared himself emperor and led a revolt. This was betrayal at the highest possible level. A man Marcus had elevated, turning against him during a period when Rome was already bleeding on every front. The natural response to betrayal is a story. And the story is almost always some version of "I was a fool," or "they will all turn on me," or "I can trust no one now." That story feels like wisdom. It's actually the wound spreading into every future decision. Marcus refused to let the event write his internal narrative for him. He drew a hard line between the thing that happened and the meaning he assigned to it. This is one of the deepest moves in Stoic practice and one of the most useful under pressure. The event is neutral until you interpret it, and the interpretation is yours. He famously reminded himself that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, that it is not the thing itself that disturbs us, but our judgment about the thing. When the revolt was put down and Cassius was killed by his own men, Marcus did not celebrate. He is said to have expressed regret that he never got the chance to forgive him. Sit with that. In the middle of the largest betrayal of his life, he governed the one territory that was still his, the meaning. Here's the application, because this is not about being a saint. After a hard failure, a bad quarter, a partner who let you down, you will tell yourself a story about what it means. That story will either keep you functional or quietly take you apart from the inside. Most people let the event dictate the story automatically, and then they carry a version of themselves that is smaller, more suspicious, more afraid than the situation actually requires. Composure at this stage means catching the story as it forms and asking a simple question. Is this interpretation true, or is it just the pain talking? What actually happened stated plainly? And what is the most useful, accurate meaning I can take forward? You don't get to control the betrayal. You do control whether it makes you wiser or just harder. Underneath all of it, the plague, the war, the betrayal, Marcus wrote constantly about death. To a modern reader, this can seem morbid, even a little dark. But he wasn't dwelling on death because he was afraid of it. He was using it as a tool for clarity, and it's one of the most practical instruments in the entire blueprint. Here's the mechanism. Under pressure, everything feels enormous. Every problem swells to the same terrifying size. The genuine crisis and the trivial annoyance start to feel equally urgent, and that flattening is exactly what exhausts you. Marcus used the fact of mortality to restore proportion. He would ask, in effect, given that my time is finite and this will all pass, does this thing in front of me actually deserve the weight I'm giving it? Most things don't. The insult doesn't. The minor setback doesn't. The need to be right in an argument doesn't. Mortality burns off the noise and leaves only what's real. He wrote that you could leave life right now, and to let that determine what you do and say and think. Not as a threat, as a filter. When you remember that the clock is running, the petty concerns lose their grip and the important ones become obvious. What matters is your conduct, your character, the people you're responsible for, the work that's actually yours to do. That's it. Everything else is static. For a leader under pressure, this is how you avoid drowning in the small stuff during the big moment. You hold the finish line in view. This applies far below the level of empires. The athlete who trains at dawn when no one is watching is running against the clock, and the clock is why the discipline holds. The founder who knows the runway is finite, doesn't waste weeks on decisions that don't move the outcome. Constraint creates clarity. Mortality is simply the ultimate constraint, and Marcus used it to keep his attention on what deserved it. When everything falls apart, ask the same question he did. A year from now, 5 years from now, at the very end, what about this actually matters? Then spend yourself there, and let the rest go. There's one more piece, and it's the one that turns survival into strength. It would have been understandable for Marcus to see his entire reign as a run of terrible luck, to feel that fate had handed him nothing but disasters while other emperors got peace and prosperity. He didn't. He arrived at a reframe so useful that people still build whole philosophies of resilience around it. He wrote that the impediment to action advances action, that what stands in the way becomes the way. Read carefully. This is not positive thinking. It's not pretending the plague was good or the betrayal was a gift. It's a precise operational stance. Whatever obstacle is in front of you contains the exact material you need to become more capable, if you're willing to work with it instead of resenting it. The plague forced Marcus to become a leader of extraordinary restraint and sacrifice. The war forced a scholar into decisive command. The betrayal forced him to demonstrate a level of self-governance most people never touch. The pressure didn't happen to him. It made him, but only because he chose to treat every obstacle as instruction rather than injustice. This is the difference between two people facing the identical crisis. One asks, "Why is this happening to me?" and burns their energy on the unfairness. The other asks, "What does this require me to become?" and pours the same energy into the answer. Same event. Opposite outcomes. And the second person doesn't just survive the pressure. They come out the other side with a capability they could not have built any other way. Because there is no version of composure, toughness, or judgment that you can develop in comfort. Those are forged only under load. So the final piece of the blueprint is a decision you make before you need it. That when everything falls apart, you will treat the wreckage as raw material. Not because it feels good, because it's the only response that turns pressure into growth instead of damage. The obstacle isn't blocking the path. Handled correctly, the obstacle is the path. So here is the whole blueprint, laid out. Build composure in the quiet years before you need it, so it's a reflex and not a hope. Narrow your attention to what you can actually move and refuse to spend yourself on what you can't. Sacrifice your own comfort first, because the people around you read your behavior, not your words. Govern the story you tell yourself about what happened, because the event is neutral until you decide what it means. Use mortality as a filter to burn off everything that doesn't matter, and treat every obstacle as the raw material for who you're becoming. 6 pieces. None of them complicated. But notice what they all have in common. Not one of them can be learned in the moment you need it. Marcus Aurelius did not read about these ideas during the plague. He had practiced them in private for years, which is the only reason they were available when his world came apart. That's the part that actually matters, and it's the part almost everyone gets wrong. Composure is not knowledge. You can understand every principle in this video perfectly and still freeze the next time the stakes go vertical, because understanding a rule and having trained it are completely different things. The philosophy proved itself in Marcus not because he could explain it, but because he acted on it when acting was hardest. So don't treat this as something to agree with. Treat it as something to rehearse. The next time something small goes wrong today, a delay, a setback, an unfair moment, that is not an interruption. That is a repetition. That is the gym. Handle it the way you'd want to handle the crisis that hasn't arrived yet, and you are quietly building the person who will be ready when it does. Pressure is coming for all of us. The only question is what you'll have built underneath before it gets here.